Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start making our first component in here, and then we're going to start manipulating that component and discussing how certain nodes work, how the wires work and things like that. So we're going to make our component. This is a light blueprint, so let's make a light. If I search in here for light, you can see it brings up the different types of lights that we can have in UE4. So the one that I'm going to look at and focus on is the point light. So when you do that, you can name your component. It's called point light. I'm just going to leave it like that there. If you ever want to name it, rename it or anything, all you have to do is click on it, and over here you can change it. You see that it's actually called a variable here, which is a bit confusing, but we'll just say this is a component for now. And again, when I have this selected, you can see that I can change different aspects of this. Okay, so in the light section, I can just change the intensity, color, the radius, if it affects words, cast shadow and stuff like that. So what we can do is, if we want to manipulate a component or the attributes within that component, a good rule of thumb is whatever you have in the details panel is typically something that you can change through the event graph. Okay, so for instance, if I grab and drag this light in here, what I have now is a reference to my point light component. Okay, you'll notice that when I select this, it doesn't show me any of the details because it's only a reference to it. If I want to change anything, I have to go back here, really, okay, or change any of the defaults. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make your first node. There's a couple of ways to do it. It's all done through this menu here. If you hold right click as well, you can kind of grab and pan this around. You can drag a big thing with marquee to select multiple nodes, or you can just select them here. So to make a new node, what you could do is you can right click and it brings up this menu. It's context sensitive, okay, by default, and I would leave it like that there. And basically in here you can search for new nodes that might help you make logic. Okay, basically to learn these nodes, the best way is to just keep using UE4, and you'll find that you're kind of using the same nodes over and over again most times, and you really start to learn the kind of system and what's available to you. So you can right click here and you can search for, like, maybe set intensity, and you can see here that it understands in this blueprint that we have a point light component, and we can just set the intensity from here. Okay, and it adds a new reference. Okay, so you can have as many references as you want, it doesn't matter. And that's it, that's your node. Or another way of doing it is, if we pull out of this here one, you can see context sensitive, it knows that we've pulled out of a point light pin, so these are data pins here. And if I pull out, we've got a data wire, that blue wire. They're all color coordinated as well, so you'll see different colors for each different component and variables when we come to make those. And if I let that go, you can see I go set intensity, and I do that, and it's exactly the same thing. Okay, so this here is a function node. It's got like an F to it, and it's already got like a predetermined function of what basically it does. We're going to be making our own custom functions later on in this series, but for now we'll just focus on pre-made ones. So basically what this one does is, on the left hand side, and this is typical of a lot of these nodes, it's got input pins and it's got output pins. This one's pretty simple. Okay, so it's got one executable input pin and it's got two data pins, okay, input ones. So one's a target, it just needs to know what point light I'm actually going to be like changing the intensity on. And then this here one is a float, which is a number with a decimal point, and it's just saying, well, what intensity do you want? Okay, and then we've got this output executable pin. So these executable pins have to be linked to something to work. Okay, and you'll notice over here on the left hand side, we've got these event nodes. We've got event begin play, event actor begin overlap, and event tick. And event nodes are denoted by the red tops, and you'll see functions are denoted by like these blue tops. And these red top ones, basically event nodes, are executed by something happening in the game. Okay, these ones are pretty easy to understand. This one gets executed on event begin play. So whenever we press play, this here fires off, okay? This event actor begin overlap. If this light in the level overlaps with another object, this one fires off. And then we have event tick, okay? This here one fires off every frame. So if you've got like a really decent computer and it's running at 200 frames per second, this is going to execute 200 times per second, which is handy for some things, but we rarely use it because it can be quite a drain on the CPU. It kind of firing off all the time, especially if you've got like a loaded blueprints that have their event tick in use. Okay, so we try not use that as much as possible. We can make custom events, and we'll do that later on in the module. But for now, we can kind of focus on these as well. So to make sure that when we press play, the intensity of this light actually gets set to 0, we have to connect these pins, okay? And what you'll notice is all these nodes are color coordinated. So these exact pins are white. So they'll only go into these. So if I try and drag it into this target, it's like, hey, this is not compatible, you know, with this. And you'll notice that happens all the time. This blue point light pin will not go into a new intensity, if you get me. And then that's it. You know, the execution flow for Unreal is always left to right. So you have probably like an event node on the left hand side, and that kicks off all this different logic. We only have one node here, okay? But you can have like a series of nodes, and it can kind of manipulate data and components within a blueprint. And these wires have to be connected to the next node, otherwise this node would never get executed. It wouldn't know when or how or whatever. If you ever want to disconnect a node, you can just right click and you can break link, or if you hold Alt, you can just hold Alt and click it and it'll disconnect as well. And that goes for any pin, okay? You'll notice when I hit compile now, this is going to give me an error because the point light isn't connected to the target. Okay, so compile there. So let's find a dark area. If I drag my light in, we can see it shines, press play, and it's off, okay? So this is working, and we can tell that it's working. Again, this is going to be easier if you've got two screens. If I press play, we're going to see this execution wire be executed. It's going to glow. Okay, there we go. And it's going to fade away. And that's just showing you how it's being executed and what's being executed. It's really good for debugging and finding out what's not working. Now, in terms of laying out your graph, because the execution flow is left to right, it's always a good idea not to do this. Okay, you don't want to have things going down. You want to have them side by side as much as possible. And we'll get through to cable management. I call these cables or wires in some module, some of the lectures in the module as well. So let's introduce a new node. This here one is going to be a delay, just so that we can see this logic take effect a bit better. So if I pull out of this wire and hit in delay, you can see I got a delay node. And I'm going to set the duration for this for 3 seconds. So this event's going to kick off when I hit play. It's going to go into this node, and it's going to just tick in here for 3 seconds. Once it's finished and completed, it's going to execute this. Okay, so press play. See my light, 3 seconds. It's done. So that's the basics of nodes, event graphs, event nodes, creating new nodes, linking them up through the execution pins. In the next one, we're going to introduce some new nodes and make this a bit more complicated. But yeah,